I appreciate your OBS attitude when it comes to the cover-up of these big hairy men. I'm turning to you to tell you my story because I'm greatly concerned. It's probably more accurate to say that I'm terribly ashamed of myself. I realize it's a long story, but please bear with me. I do hope you'll take the time to read it and help me. I think you and Scott are the only ones who can. I'm a Native American woman and my encounter happened almost 20 years ago, but is clear in my head as if it happened just yesterday. I'm sure it always will be. I've lived my life doing things off-grid and usually as far out in the wilderness as I can go. I've climbed to the summit of mountains, stayed at 12,000 feet in a tent by myself for a month, and I've slept in the snow just for fun. I'm that woman that usually can't find any friends to go with me camping because no one wants to go in the winter or rough it as far out as I go. That's the story of my lifetime. Well, not really. I got lots of people that do that crazy crap. You would think I would have my encounter in one of these remote places, in one of my excursions, but I didn't. I came across this being right smack dab in the middle of the day, right off a crowded beach full of swimmers in northeastern Washington. My encounter was up close for a few minutes. The last time it lasted most of the day. I went kayaking with my kids, my sister-in-law, and her kids at a large wilderness lake in the far northeast corner of Washington by the Canadian border. We stopped at a crowded beach at midday so that we could eat our lunch and stretch out our thighs. Both my sister-in-law and I felt extremely uneasy there, so we decided not to stay long. After the kids had eaten, she loaded them up in the boats and all left together. I lagged behind so I could eat my lunch. I noticed the beach had emptied of the many families who were swimming and I was now completely alone. I started feeling really uneasy, until I noticed off in the distance an old man walked down a steep embankment with two small boys and sat down under a rope swing about 100 yards off the beach. He was watching the two while they were doing what little boys do, tossing stones in the water and playing at the water's edge. They had their backs to him and didn't seem to be paying attention to them. I decided to sit in my boat offshore about 25 yards to finish my lunch and watch them. I felt safe there for a little while, but the feeling of being watched from some other direction. I was quickly becoming overwhelmed and I was beginning to let my imagination get the best of me. I thought maybe there was something dangerous in the water, and since I had given my life vest to one of the kids and I'm a lousy swimmer, I decided to kayak over to the shore and stayed within reach of it while I made my way around the lake. I kayaked over to the shore and headed in that direction of the family who were now about a quarter mile ahead of me in the big water. I had to pass right by the old man along my way. He was sitting on the shore on what looked like a stump with his left leg crossed over his right. His hands were clasped over his upper knee and he was staring at me. As I got closer and closer to him, the two little boys had vanished and he was still sitting there watching me. I no longer felt uneasy. In fact, I felt safe knowing that he had his eyes on me so intently. I thought if there was something dangerous in the water and I accidentally rolled my boat, he would at least see it and maybe even rescue me. I waved at him, but he didn't wave back. I assumed he was old because he was wearing a turtleneck sweater and long pants. It was such a hot day, I just figured he must be elderly and have a bad circulation. I waved at him again, but he still didn't wave back. As I approached him, I saw he was not elderly at all. He was probably only in his mid-40s. His hair was slightly salt and pepper, his beard had streaks of grey. He was extremely handsome, movie star quality, with perfect features. I know I was staring at him with my jaw dropped because people that attractive don't show up very often. He seemed to have a gleam in his eyes and suggested he was enjoying my reaction seeing him. One corner of his lips curled up slightly in a subtle smile. He had a strong jaw, a perfect nose, high cheekbones, and his eyes were almond-shaped but not slanted, and a very pretty light brown color. His skin was dark tanned, and looked native, but he had a full short trimmed beard. His lips were full but not leathery or disproportionate. He was gorgeous. He wasn't glaring at me, but he was squinting from the sun. Even though his eyes were narrowed, I could still tell he had large, very thick eyelashes. They weren't overly big or bulging, they were perfectly proportioned. As I passed him literally 7 feet away, I realized I was staring at him. So I lowered my eyes. It was then I noticed he was not wearing a turtleneck but was completely covered in thick silver-tipped brown hair everywhere. He was not wearing any clothes at all, but was completely covered in short, glossy, clean-looking hair. I was close enough I could tell the direction it grew in. Had he not been covered in hair, I would have thought I had a chance meeting with a movie star or a Hollywood model. He was absolutely stunning. His shoulders are very broad, his chest muscled, and his biceps were defined but not freakish like those goofy bodybuilders who get on steroids. He was strong-looking but not abnormal for his size. I glanced ahead of my boat and then looked back over my shoulder at him. But then he stood up and reached over his head to swipe a branch out of his face. He had to have been at least 8 feet tall. He was so muscular, I could see his muscles rippling beneath his hair and his biceps and his thighs. It was surreal. I wasn't afraid, just curious. I glanced ahead and back again and he completely disappeared in the trees. By the time I caught up, my family, my sister-in-law brought to my attention there was a hunter walking at the top of the mountain in a huge open clearing alongside me. I was in the water and he was about a half-mile away as the crow flies above me on the steep mountain. He kept up with my boat and walked looking down the mountain toward me. For the rest of the day I lost sight of him when the high meadow dropped back into the trees on the other side of the mountain. By the time I was loading up the boats in my truck, it was almost dark. Even though I didn't see him, I knew he was there in the trees still watching me. I couldn't get the encounter out of my mind. I never once thought it was a Sasquatch. I honestly thought he was a very attractive man with some kind of skin disorder that caused excessive body hair. You see, I don't believe in Bigfoot. I thought it was a myth told by the elders to keep kids from playing too far from camp. I thought I must have come across someone who had the same disorder as Wolf Boy from the old Barnum and Bailey circus. During the time of the century I was curious. I set out to research it by searching the internet for information. When I came across a website that seemed to be an informative site. It was a forum for anomalies, and if you told them your story, maybe they would help you solve your mystery. I posted what I had seen and didn't think anything of it until I got a phone call. This is back when there was caller ID boxes that would show who was calling on your landline. I got this call within 1 hour posting it. The caller ID read US government. I picked up not knowing what's going on. The person who answered told me he was so and so from the Department of, I can't remember, and he would like to talk to me about the Sasquatch I had seen. I honestly had to ask him who he was again because the name Sasquatch completely took me off guard. He repeated it and I instantly recognized that I didn't want to talk to him and hung up. This is where I feel ashamed. My curiosity got the best of me and I began researching Bigfoot and came across a newly organized BFROO. I eventually got up the nerve and told my story. I received a lot of ridicule from even my sister-in-law, who claimed all I had seen was a hunter and quit being a ninny, of course. So I was hell-bent on finding anyone I could who would believe me. The BFROO seemed to be trustworthy. I told them my story. It wasn't long before I was asked to be interviewed on several Bigfoot radio stations and speak at several conferences. In fact, I was supposed to speak at another conference this coming weekend, but it was cancelled due to the COVID. I've met Bob Gimlin and all the others who now terrify me to realize they could be capable of. You see, after you being brought to your attention the lost footage in the Patterson-Gimlin film, I'm wondering if every time someone tells their encounter, these big organizations, does the government make a note for the whereabouts of these poor beings and go in and exterminate them? I don't know. From what I understand, that is a high possibility for sure. That is directly a possibility. Oh, I'm saying possibly, but I'm getting it from so many different directions from educated people. That is definitely probably the case with that one big website and organization. Well, I know so far, but it's enough fuel for you guys to dig for yourselves and look for yourself, right? I will never forgive myself if I was the cause of that, I'm gonna say it, man's death. I remember flat stating to the crowd in front of Bob and Jeff in one of the Bigfoot conferences I spoke at that to kill one of these people would be murder. He is not in agreement, but I wonder if he changed it all internally. I'm sick to my stomach over it. I've told exactly where I saw the big hairy man on many occasions, and I wonder if that was an exterminator monitoring program just waiting for the location to go in and thin the Sasquatch of the area. I pray not. The man I saw was just that, he was a man. He was not innate, he was intelligent, and even though he didn't speak, I could tell he had personality and a soul. I will admit that all my heart that when I looked into his eyes I felt I was looking at someone who was superior to me in intelligence. Kind of like a college professor when you're just starting high school. To kill one of them would truly be murder, and I feel sick to my stomach to think that my testimony could lead or have led to his demise. Should we be telling our stories, or does this put these beings in danger? Thank you for reading my story. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm glad you're brave enough to stand your ground. Stay safe out there. Sincerely, Angelique.
So, here we go. This person requested to have the place of his employment, and name of employment, remain anonymous. Plus their name, because they have a high security clearance, at their place of employment. So here we go. I'll try to blank out as I go, so I don't cause any crap for this guy, and his place of employment, which is the United States Navy. Hello, thank you for reading about this account. It took place September 2005 on the U.S. Naval Base in California. Please do not use the name of the base. You can say Navy Base in California if you wish. I also ask that you please not use my name. I still work at the Naval Base and have high security clearance. Some background about me. I have a wife and kids including 4 grandchildren. I am a naval civilian engineer and employed directly with the U.S. government. I've worked on this naval installation as a project program manager for over 32 years. I am an avid outdoorsman. This may be lengthy to get the detail it deserves. The Naval Base's research and development facility that tests air and sea launch weapons systems, including aircraft development. This Navy base is surrounded by several mountain ranges. Please look if you wish. In September 2005, I was supporting operations for the new in development Joint Direct Attack Munition JDAM weapon platform. These tests were conducted on a bombing range. I can't say the name now to be very clear. I did not see firsthand what took place. I was monitoring a secure military radio transmission during this operation, and listening to these events unfolding afterwards. I spoke directly to 3 of the 4 eyewitnesses, all government personnel, all with high security clearances. There are approximately 40 to 50 individuals involved with this test. And I heard what took place. The test consisted of an F-18 night attack aircraft, to drop a single JDAM, on a target, close to the middle of the lake bed. The target was an old shot-up military tank at the target center. As reference, these types of tests included tracking radar, with support personnel. Very empowered infrared tracking cameras. Typically one to track the aircraft during the flight, and one to track the bomb in flight after the release from the aircraft, onto the impact on the target. Safety personnel, communication personnel, road guard personnel, portable power personnel, and stationary high-speed impact cameras, with remote operation personnel. Depending on the test engineer, more tracking cameras, and additional resources can be utilized. You get the picture. I was supporting one of the powerful infrared cameras that I'd mentioned earlier, approximately 1.5 miles away from target center. As the crow flies, listening to the radio communication between the aircraft and operations personnel in the control center. By this time it was close to 10 p.m. on a moonless night. The test was underway, and the aircraft was performing practice runs on the target. This helps to calibrate systems and checks before dropping the bomb. After several practice runs, the pilot requested permission to master the arm system, and for clearance to go hot to drop the bomb. He was cleared to do so by the control center, and the test or drop was about to go underway. As the aircraft was inbound, cleared and ready to drop the weapon, an urgent announcement sounder of the radio: "Abort the drop, abort, 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 someone is in the impact area." So the aircraft was commanded to secure the weapon, and not drop. Understand that to abort an aircraft cleared inbound hot run is a big deal. To have someone in a military bombing range during a weapon drop is a very big deal. Please keep in mind it is pitch black in the middle of the desert. No moon, a very low lake bed, surrounded by mountains, with no light pollution of any kind. It would be extremely difficult to see your hand directly from your face. The ground is littered with shrapnel, and impact craters. It would be impossible to run through this area on a dark night without any lights. What was witnessed by the 4 stationary high-resolution infrared, thermo night vision impact cameras, was an extremely large individual pass in front of and between the cameras. Plain as day, very clear without obstruction, each camera had its own operator to record the weapon impact. The main operator was the individual that sounded the abort command. The calculated height of this individual was 9 foot 2 inches. I have no idea how they got that estimate. Things went higher from there. Several personnel were dispatched into the impact area to look at this individual. There's a lot of radio traffic to see whom could have walked right into a weapons test area. 25 miles from civilization, on the largest secure Navy base in the country. In the middle of night, without lights. At this time, I tried to convince the aircraft track and camera operator to drop coverage of the F-18 and swing down to the impact area. He refused for several minutes. It was not until the control center told him to drop track of the plane and look down into the impact area. By this time it was too late. Whoever or whatever it was could not be seen. This is no surprise. There are several canyons in the area, and many old military vehicles, aircraft, and even a ship, where someone or something could have hit, or used as cover. However, all we could see were jackrabbits, and a couple coyotes. This incident was quickly dropped, and never spoken about again. I could go into detail about what the camera operator saw. A massive man about 9 feet tall, with arms that hung low, and walked right through a military exercise that appeared to be covered in hair. I was never asked to write a report. And to my knowledge, no one else did either. Very strange. Even though a major test was aborted, and an individual was witnessed entering into a secure Navy facility, recorded by 4 separate government personnel, utilizing 4 separate cameras, do with this event as you may. To be honest, I do not care if listeners take you serious or not. I was there with about 50 other government employees, listening to what took place, with 4 eyewitnesses. I'm not trying to convince anyone, but this event truly happened. Thanks, man. Well, there you go, there's another one. From someone of a credible position in the military. Hi, my name is Bob, and I just watched an episode that left me compelled to write you because I know Rob, the person you spoke about in the video. I've known him for several years. And he's really gotten the shaft from the BFMO and from the BC government. At the time was the provincial Liberals. Rob is very passionate about the subject, because when he was living in Seychelles area, he was thrust into it when his home started being visited by the beings, and his children were having encounters in the yard. He didn't ask for the situation but had to deal with it while struggling with a broken back and raising 5 children. All while he was on disability. Alright, listen to this story, listen to every single word, you guys. The BFMO took advantage of Rob and his intimate knowledge of the area, promising him money in exchange for guiding him to the hotspots throughout the area and helping organize and set up the paid expedition. And if you don't remember what the BFMO stands for, is the Big Fat Morons Organization. Rob was exceptional in the expedition, which made it a huge success for the BFMO but not for Rob. The BFMO absconded with all the cash, not paying Rob for his hundreds of hours of work, and not even a dime for gas. I know there are 2 sides to every story, but this is what I observed. Rob was devastated but adamant to continue on his quest for knowledge about these beings. Shortly after this, Rob, in his search for areas where these beings had been sighted, came across an abandoned BC campground called the Homesite Creek Campground. The campground had been abandoned by the government and then grown over with weeds and garbage and abandoned equipment and waste. Rob struck a deal with the BC government to restore and improve the site in exchange for ownership. Rob and his family threw their heart and souls into working on the site, hauling tons and tons of garbage out of the area, preparing what the provincial said was an ecological disaster, and restoring the watershed to near historic pristine conditions. The effect on the wildlife in the area was immediate, with Roosevelt elk, deer and bear, to name a few, all returning to the area. The campground started to attract visitors, and a great reputation as well. It started to have regular visits by the Sasquatch beings, probably because of its proximity to the creek, which flows from the top of the area all the way down to the ocean. Some visiting tourists from Belgium had an encounter and called a friend who, after staying a couple times, talked Rob into helping him with a documentary, which went on to be very popular in Europe and won several awards. Rob never received a dime despite all of his help and efforts, as well as being the main character in the film. That's really unfortunate, because you do have to sign a waiver before you release your image for any television show, or anything that has to do with video. I know for a fact, been there, done that, and that probably needs some more looking into. But anyway, making her film. It was shortly after this that Rob started being targeted by BC Forestry and the BC government. Probably because of his openness about his experience with these Sasquatch beings and his opposition to logging in the Homesite Creek area, despite having invested thousands of hours in the campground and virtually every penny he owned. They forcibly took the campground, which was also his family home, from him. Rob now lives with his family near 100 miles away. His involvement and exposure to workers in the BFMO and his knowledge of these Sasquatch beings has altered his life and left him devastated. He is an honest, hard-working man dedicated to his family and his community, and I truly believe that someone has deliberately targeted him because of his knowledge, and his openness about these beings. After my own life-changing and terrifying experience in the Shuswap Lakes area near Sycamus, I spent quite some time with Rob in the Seashell area and had several experiences in the area with him. I agree on your opinions on the BFMO and Todd the charlatan self-promoting ghillie suit-wearing idiot who charges thousands of dollars for real Bigfoot expeditions, while shamelessly promoting himself as an expert. You know, just so everybody knows, I wasn't not even aware that people actually charged people to take them into the forest for a Sasquatch experience. Just this past week or two is the first time I was informed that this is going on, and how freaking embarrassing is that? I'll tell you what, if anybody wants to know where to go where these things frequent, I won't even charge you a freaking beer. I'll tell you exactly where to go for it. Who gives a shit? It's stupid people charging money to go into the woods for a Sasquatch experience. Idiots. Anyway, I'm a big fan of your work. Keep posting these stories so people will know the truth. Like they say, the truth will set you free. I live in Washington. I'll try to make this as brief as possible, sorry if I have too many details. At age 16 in 1982, while elk hunting in Washington state, on the breaks of the Columbia River, at least 10 miles below any trees or sagebrush and rim rock, is the head of the Bryant Canyon. It is covered with wind machines now, but I'll never forget that day as long as I live. I was with 2 other teens. While our fathers were hiking the canyon towards us, hoping to drive elk our way. We all had rifles, a 7mm mag, a .308 and a .30-06. We watched it walk the bottom of the steep counter from over a mile away to within 100 yards of us, maybe 7 or 8 minutes long. Could you imagine that? Having something over a mile away and watching it walk to you up to 100 yards, and imagine having a video camera for that. Holy crap. Of course they didn't, but no big deal. It had a blonde color, 2 long arms and 2 short legs, huge dinner plate hands, and hair all over it. We put scopes on it and we're scared shitless. It was not an elk, it was not a dude. We were getting panicked as it came closer and closer, and got inside 100 yards from us. We all stood up, put our rifles on it. It was about 200 feet lower in elevation than us. At that point, and when it saw us, it froze up in a kind of a holy shit posture for about 2 seconds. Then it turned 90 degrees and went straight up the side of the canyon. It wasn't really running, but it was definitely hauling ass. Never saw it again, but did find some tracks right across the road into the other canyon. Hunter orange was not required in 1982, but I never saw another hunter that wasn't wearing at least a red plaid shirt or an orange hat. Anyone walking through this area in a ghillie suit on the elk opener would be a suicidal dumbass. I did not take this picture but want to share it with you. It's real and exactly what I saw in the bright sunshine on October 30th, 1982. That son of a bitch had a 6-pack. And of course our own fathers said we must have been smoking some funny stuff. You know, it's kind of funny when people always say that with an encounter and they'll say,
Oh, we're doing any drugs? We must have been smoking some of the wacky backy. Okay, well, guess what, you guys? All you people that can't take and accept this topic. If it was drugs that made over 10,000 people alone noted recorded encounters. If there's drugs that made you see an 8 to 9 foot tall hairy upright creature, then every single person that went for an operation and went under anesthetics, or whatever painkillers, would be seeing 8 or 9 foot hairy people in the hospital room. People at raves would be chronically talking about the 8 foot tall high hairy dudes. You see, when you get to the right high, that doesn't happen. People that do drugs do not report seeing hairy upright beings non-stop. It just doesn't freaking happen, and if it was chronic upright hairy beings that marijuana caused you to see, they'd probably use them in advertisements as a plateau of being stoned level. Which no, it always doesn't happen. Because drugs don't make you think you see 8 or 9 foot tall hairy beings only while you're in the forest. Okay, you guys. So you could probably drop the well, they're probably smoking wacky tobacco thing or doing drugs because it just doesn't fit. There's people doing drugs in every single major city and every single freaking rave place and nightclub, and there's people on drugs in every single hospital, and there isn't one recorded setting of an 8 to 9 foot tall being in these places because the drugs are doing it. Get your heads out of your asses, right? There's my rant anyway. Carrying on, I've also been going salmon fishing on Vancouver rounds since the 1980s. My parents telegraphed code in 1998. I saw a Sasquatch run down and dive into the water from the westernmost point of West Craycroft Island, wherever that is, probably on the inside, meaning inside of Vancouver Island. It surfaced one time and I never saw it again. The current can rip through there at times, so I don't know if it was catching the current to travel or just getting out of sight. When it did surface the one time, it reminded me of a sea lion taking a breath, and I was locked onto a binos by then and never saw it again. Had I not seen it run into the water, I would have not noticed that it wasn't a sea lion. I was just there 3 weeks ago. Fishing was good and I didn't see any Sasquatches, so it was a good trip.